Lawyers who put together wills. What is the craziest oddest thing someone wanted to put in theirs? When my great aunt, whom I barely had any relationship with, died, I discovered that in her will, she left me a taxidermy giant silk moth that she had hanging on her wall. Evidently someone told her about my love for bugs. I still have it and it's one of the coolest things in my collection of odd knickknacks. She left my cousin a Furby. Not a will, but a deed. The city I work for was renovating a small park that was donated to the city in the 1910s. We went looking through the handwritten deed for easements or other restrictions and found that the family could claw the property back if the park were not perpetually provided with a fountain of pleasant running water fit for consumption by man and beast alike. The family still has descendants in town, so we installed a new water fountain with a dog bowl filler just to be safe. I work in probate. The oddest thing I've seen in a will is to euthanize their beloved horse. Have it cremated and its ashes scattered with the decedent. Lucky for her horse, she named a horse that was already dead, so the one she got afterwards lived to see another farm. My grandfather passed a few hours ago, but my grandmother came to me after with a navy blue tie featuring pink elephants. Ridiculous looking, but she said that he wore it to intimidate people in business, as someone willing to wear such a ridiculous tie doesn't care about what people think. That scares people. So he wanted me to have it so I could do the same. Edit. I will add an edit with a picture later. To everyone, thank you. Edit 2. It's not as in your face as some of you likely thought, but I love it. You Undead Kitten said, here, more than to my daughter Anne, who created my beautiful granddaughter Jane, and her dear fourth husband John, who laid hands on my Jane. I leave $1, you money grubbing bastards. To Gene I'll leave all of my monetary assets, save $5,000 and my best gun, which I'll leave to my son Bill, on the condition that he beats John bloody during the time between my funeral and my burial. Jane, bail your uncle out of jail, please. My grandma left a penny and a nasty comments to almost every person in the will, all of her sons and daughters, even a few grandchildren. Except for me, I got $1,000. Thanks, Grandma. My vindictive grandmother left my aunt $20 as a reminder of the $20 my aunt stole from her once. Not a lawyer, but an aging woman my family knew left her house, large, and in a very affluent neighborhood, and estate to family friends for so long as her cats were alive and taken care of, and said house. After they died, the house was to be sold and the remaining estate donated. The weird thing is, it's been like 20 years and the cats are still alive. Also, they've changed color. A good clause is always for reasons known to them. Witches will speak for you've gone and ducked up. Asshole. I don't forgive you. In my own will, I've left my father the contents of my kitchen trash can at the time of my passing. For reasons known to him. Full stop. Here's one from one of my dad's law partners. He had a lady come in with an itemized list of books and wanted her will to contain all of the books and who will get what based on her choosing. So basically she decides who gets what specific book instead of letting her beneficiaries decide. The truly astonishing thing is how many books and how specific they get. According to dad's law partner, her list is at about 2,000 books to be divided among about 30 people. She is apparently very specific and comes back at least once a year to add all the new books she's gotten. A Furby collection from models collected in the late 90s. They were convinced they would retain future value. This was 2011. My sister's mother-in-law is leaving her house to her 3 sons. If one wants to sell out his third of the house, he has to sell it to the other 2 brothers for $1. Lots of people sending their friends and family on weird errands to spread their ashes, leaving money for people to take trips and spread their ashes around the world. Pet trusts are a fun one, leaving a whole whack of money in a trust to be used for the care of the pet during their life. However, my favorite ever, that I obviously didn't draft, was a lawyer who left the bulk of his estate, millions in today's dollars, to whatever Toronto area woman had the most children at a specific date some years in the future. I recall the winner had 10. I'm the executor of my grandmother's will. I also get the house and everything in it and a share of life insurance that's split 3 ways between myself, sister, and mom. My mom has always said that all my dad, my grandmother's son-in-law, Like to have is some table. Well, in the will there's like a whole paragraph that states how my dad gets nothing. He doesn't lay a finger on anything in the house or any money. How my dad is basically worthless and deserves nothing, and how he was a crap dad and that she begrudgingly has my mom in the will. Thanks grandma, I'll appreciate the awkwardness. I, early 20s, was forced to write a will due to the health insurance I get at work. And, amongst sensible stuff, the in-house lawyer said it was totally okay for this clause to be added. My funeral wishes are that I be buried in a coffin which has been spring-loaded, such that opening the coffin would cause alarm to future archaeologists. Then a bunch of stuff about if this is too costly I'd be cremated and have my ashes scattered in a specific place. Edit. Thank you for the gold. Saw this answer from a similar question some time ago. When a dad died, he set up financial installments so long as his daughter remains under a certain weight. Dude was controlling her diet from the grave. Not a lawyer, but my mom put in her will that if she dies under suspicious circumstances that my sister and I won't be left anything. She watches a lot of true crime. My great grandmother left most of her money to a local donkey sanctuary. My old landlord took 2 years to boot me out because her mother who owned the place died and she wanted to sell the place. But her mother's carer said the mother verbally promised the house to her. Even though it was not written in the will, it still took 2 years of fighting in court to clear things up. No, the carer didn't get it in the end even after all the appeals. Not a lawyer, but I work at a law firm. One client left $100,000 to his 2 cats so they could maintain their current lifestyle. No, mom, in order to bequeath something, you actually have to own it. Not a lawyer, but my grandpa puts in his will a chocolate bar for every one of his grandkids. Well, I have like 12 cousins and very difficult to track down where a couple of them went. All this estates and money he had in will was at a standstill for months because they couldn't find my couple cousins. Had to show court we put in effort to hire someone to track them down etc. The lawyer that was helping execute the will was blown away that this lawyer allowed this and why he wouldn't highly suggest not to do it. But I'm not complaining cause I got a Toblerone out of the deal. Edit. Thanks for first gold star. This one isn't necessarily crazy, just an interesting glimpse into the mind of a kind old woman in her 90s. My aunt and uncle, both were more like parents and incredibly beautiful people, passed away within a few weeks of one another. When my uncle became ill, the aunt tried to work on a will with her long-term lawyer, but she was kinda just old and out of it. Her main concern the entire time was small knickknacks like a jar of pennies she wanted a distant cousin to have or a used jacket from the 70s she bequeathed to her sister-in-law. It was quite touching how much time she spent carefully considering each item and who would get it. Most of the items were used and didn't even really hold any sentimental value. She just wanted them to go to good homes. When she passed away, everyone knew exactly who was getting each odd item. The real kicker is when the lawyer told the primary beneficiaries that she never got around to the bigger assets and all that jazz. She basically told the lawyer, pay for our funeral and anything we owe and then family members X, Y, and Z can figure out the rest. It ended up being millions in homes, lakefront property, jewelry, antique firearms, vehicles, life insurance policies, stocks, bonds, gold coins, etc., etc. Luckily, the family is very close and everything went off without a hitch. They were amazing people who wanted to keep family items in the family. They just didn't put that much weight on their incredible wealth. They also hid their wealth amazingly. We all knew that they were very comfortable, but no one had any idea they were deep into 8-figure assets. It was just funny to see a random niece get a set of plastic cups, worn dance shoes, and a check for $125,000. So this is related. Worked on a divorce up a couple who fought over every single thing in the house, separating pillows and such. They were left 52 gallons of vanilla extract by her grandmother. In a secondary proceeding he was awarded all but 5 gallons. 2 weeks later he sent in a case of samples in Ziploc baggies to our office along with a request to subpoena a urine test from his ex-wife to prove she pissed in the jugs before he picked them up. We never needed to, as she screamed in court that she pissed them full just like he pissed all over her during their marriage. They were neat. This same couple went to court for nearly 2 years over a Beanie Baby collection. They had 3 kids. Just last week I handled a matter where the parents left millions in artwork to various people, wads of cash to various charities, and only left their kids the family cats. Turns out they did it because the kids got them the cats to comfort the parents in their old age, and the parents ducking hated the cats but the kids wouldn't let them get rid of the cats. Lady wanted her small dog to be buried with her. If the dog happened to be alive when the lady passed, she wanted the dog put down and then join her. Edit. Thank you kind stranger for the silver. I had the first son, so my dad decided to leave me more. Except he did the math wrong and it came out to 105%. He had dementia. My grandpa gave me all his tools, which sounds dumb but we are in the same trade and it was a real life changer. It included a lift and his old shop truck, so I pretty much got everything to start my own shop but a building, a pretty good chunk of change, and his dog Tanner. As long as I made sure his live-in girlfriend at the time got nothing at all, and I told my uncle he was fat and his wife was going to leave him if she couldn't find his pecker. There was literally a script inside the will. It all went smooth and my uncle lost weight and Janice is an arsehole, and it turns out Tanner is kind of an arsehole too, but it's okay because my grandpa was kind of an arsehole. A good one but still sort of an arsehole. And they have the same mustache and eyebrows, so now I come home from work every day and get stared down by my grandpa while I poop. Client wanted her ashes spread at the restaurant, on the beach, where she met her husband. And my grandfather passed his will, asked that I clean out his shed. And I alone. I found marijuana seeds, old real style film pornography, which was hilarious, and a bunch of other unsavory paraphernalia. 50s flick knives too. In my mum's will, which I have seen, she has left me the kitchen table and chairs. She lives on a South Manchester council estate. My brother gets the sideboard. Not a lawyer. Work for a will writers trust specialist in the UK. Currently studying toward my TEP. One of our earlier clients passed recently. Turns out the man she left almost everything to, including the residue of her estate, which was considerable, was her regular taxi driver. She had also named him as her executor. He had no clue. The woman named as her executor and main beneficiary on her previous 2 wills, a close friend of many years, was understandably flabbergasted and contested the will. We responded to her solicitor's Lark v. Nugis request, informed Mr. Taxi Driver, who didn't even know our client had passed, and the will was upheld. Aforementioned friend was left a legacy of UACute 5000 if I remember correctly, but her nose was clearly out of joint. Bonus observation: it takes a lot less than UACute 5000 being up for grabs to make families turn against each other. Can get really nasty. One of the most startling things I've learned in my short time in this business. My great uncle's official will gave the contents of his outhouse to the city council of a nearby town after they'd tried to take his land twice to build a new water treatment plant. He spent quite a few years fighting eminent domain claims and just wanted to give them something in return. As a joke, his kids boxed up all the books and magazines in the outhouse and dropped them off at City Hall. Obligatory not a lawyer. I asked for a Viking style pyre for my funeral. Turns out that's not legal. Not a lawyer, but I worked with plenty of estates and trust accounts over the years. This particular scenario isn't so much about the will itself being strange, but the circumstances that led up to the trust account being opened. I used to work at a bank in the estates department. I was an administrator who had to manage the files, including encroachments upon the capital. That is, I want to take some money out now, please. I had this one account, multi-million-dollar trust for one single beneficiary, the son of the deceased. What's interesting is that the son killed the parents with a hammer in grotesque and brutal fashion. He pleaded insanity. He would call once a year from the penitentiary mental hospital, requesting $50 for commissary, to buy chips and gum. The call was always strange. He was very polite, very doped up. The quality of the call was always very tinny, like he was far away from the phone. Adopting your girlfriend? Not technically that, but still. I read a lot of estate documents as part of my job. There is so much subtle shade in them occasionally. They can be pretty entertaining. One super wealthy lady had a huge section for the care and well-being of her pets, with primary and successor caretakers. A certain amount of money from the trust for care and feeding of each pet. One pet owner might receive $3,000 a month to take care of one of her pets after she passed, and certain stipulations on how they were to be cared for. While some might see it as excessive, the language and stipulations she had, and how they were referred to showed that she really loved her pets. In that same will and trust, she also left a slew of people only $1, so that there would be no chance they could take the trust to probate court on the basis that they were merely forgotten. That part had so much subtle shade. A lot of they know what they did. They are well aware of their guilt in the matter. etc. She split up about $2 million among 5 or 6 different animal rescues and animal welfare charities. It was around 200 pages long, and I swear I read the entire thing just for the sheer entertainment value. Not a lawyer yet, but one interesting case in inheritance law that I came across was the one of a super rich owner of a private bank who left his shares to his sons under the condition and restraint that they will act as managers of the private bank, but with a personal liability concerning the bank's debt. So what he did was giving them the money and commit them to lifelong work in the bank, while putting their own assets at risk. So when one of the sons decided to sell his shares because he was old and sick, the courts had to decide whether he gets any money from the will. The condition was not fulfilled anymore as he gave up the manager position. One other son wanted to sell his shares. Of course that would not have been allowed under the condition either. Edit. For those interested, these are the court rulings for the case. OL Jean Chen 21U 1836/07 and BGHIVZR 202/07. Not a lawyer, but my grandmother's will stated that my father had to outlive her by a certain amount of time. I honestly don't remember exactly how long. I was 15. My father died less than a month after she did. So instead of things going to my father, the next step was the estate being divided between me, my sister, and 2 cousins. It was so bizarre. I once wrote a will for a guy who thought he could get away from giving his ex-wife half his assets by putting them in a will for his kids. Doesn't work like that, buddy boy. Lawyer here. Probably the woman who wanted to gift the frozen semen of her dead dog. My grandfather left me $1. He had dementia and confused my dad, ripping him off with me. He left the rest of the family between $100,000 and a few million each. They all said they felt horrible because they knew the details, but not horrible enough to give up any of their share. The way I see it is it was never my money to begin with, so it's not a loss. I'm just glad my sister got $100,000. She needed it more than any of the others. Might be late to the party and not a lawyer, but my great granddad had a clause in his will that stated something along the lines of, if any of the beneficiaries decide to dispute the contents of the decedent's estate, their share becomes $1 and nothing else. Seemed like a pretty good way to maintain harmony among his survivors. A lot of people want their ashes spread at Disneyland. I'm not a lawyer, but my dad put something really weird in his will. I, a 17-year-old last year, was the recipient of a rock thrown at my head. I owed it to my dad's quirky sense of humor, and he probably thought that it would be the funniest hit to ever happen, and it was even any special rock. It was one you'd find at the bottom of a river. Anyways, this year I was reading some of the stuff he had written, as I was never allowed to see the will, being that I was too young at the time and didn't think he'd end up dying. Regardless, the note under my name and recipient items I was to get if he died was throw this rock at a saucer and hit him in the head with it, but make it surprising. And I was thinking, what the dad, what kind of a will is this? Then I read a little further on and he had left a note saying this is the rock that I had hit him in the head with when he was teaching me how to skip rocks when I was younger, and I hit him so hard to dented his skull above his ear and it never really healed. It was the most meaningful thing he'd ever done, and after all the years me and my dad had messed around with each other, it was his way of winning and taking the final crack at me. It was so heartfelt it moved to tears. He got the last laugh and I was completely okay with it. Edit. Thank you for my first gold. Edit. Thank you for the silver, caring stranger. My own grandmother specified which of the children and grandchildren should get which of the family recipes, and somehow felt the need to include commentary about why certain decisions were made. One recipe was this Prohibition era recipe for beer, which I knew my uncle, also a home brewer, wanted, but she left it to me, with the comment that I know you wanted it, Teddy. but she has the second best penmanship of the girls and will make you a copy. And then like 8 pages later, in among the specific descriptions of her vast collection of romance novels, really, was a line, and, specific Jude Devereaux title, to Spidey, who will please subtract about half the hops before she copies a beer recipe for her Uncle Teddy so that any of us can drink it. Our John had his IPA last summer and just about died. Uncle John just about burst into tears laughing and Uncle Teddy had long since left the room because he has no ducks whatsoever to give about romance novels. Uncle John, of course, was still in the room because there was also still Yundling. And no, I have no idea how she got this all done. My guess is she wrote it herself and the law students who come to her independent living building signed off on it. It was elaborate, that's for sure. Total value of the estate was well under $8,000. So it was mostly a funny last letter from grandma. Not a lawyer, but helped drive a dear elderly friend of mine to his appointments to have his will redone after his wife died. He was a member of a VFW that was very badly mismanaged, to the point they were coming to him to bail them out of debt for thousands every other month. At the same time this was happening, the commander of that VFW had his wife begging to borrow money for their personal account as well. He tried to have it put in his will that while he had planned on leaving the majority of his money to the VFW, he could not in good faith leave the money, knowing it would be so badly mismanaged, and probably used to offset the addictions of people in charge. Attorney would not allow that, but he did agree to hold a letter with the man's explanation for after his death. I am assuming the attorney did send it, because I know the commander and his awful wife have been stirring up trouble with the man's family, trying to have his will contested. I got some rock my grandpa really liked. Edit. Just woke up and holy cow guys. Thank you. I am a qualified solicitor. My favorite two are 1. A lady wanted to create a trust fund of $100,000 for her pet fish. When I asked if it was a special kind of fish, she confirmed it was just a normal goldfish but she wanted it to be fed fresh avocado every day and be looked after by a local dog walker after she died. She was absolutely serious. 2. Another lady confessed she had a secret daughter, and she wanted to leave the daughter some money and photographs without the rest of her family finding out. Even her husband does not know. That will be a fun conversation when she passes away. Had a very attractive woman with terminal cancer try to get herself stuffed by a taxidermist and given to some rich guy that had been basically a sugar daddy to her for a few months. He said he would give me $1 million a week allowance as long as it was in an official will that he could see. I sent her to a lawyer who I knew that would do about anything for a buck because I didn't want to end up in the news when she died. That was 2 years ago. No clue what happened to her. Not really the question but related. A lawyer once advised my 90 years old aunt to adopt me, 24 at the time, to avoid paying inheritance tax. Now I'm not a big fan of tax avoidance, but her last name is Falcon in my language which is immensely cooler than my current surname. Almost would have done it. Edit. A lot of people are asking why I haven't or saying I should have. There were several things giving me grief about that plan. Not only that I really loathe tax avoidance from all my heart. In the end it wasn't even necessary. My aunt just gifted me parts of the land she wanted to bequeath to me. So neither the gift nor the inheritance will come over the tax exemption amount. Relative worked for a firm preparing wills and was confronted by an executor who had an edict to scatter the deceased's ashes from a microlight aircraft. He couldn't fly one. She kindly pointed out to him that the drafting said nothing about whether said microlight was in flight at the time of scattering. My grandmother had her boobs done when she was in her 60s. Nothing really wrong with that. But when she died, she wanted an open casket with her boobs on display. Really Nana? She passed away at 80 and got exactly what she asked for. Granddad had ended up sticking 2 strategically placed daisies on her boobs. So she got what she wanted and so did Granddad. R.I.P. Granny. You silly $%CH. Love you. When my great granddad died in his will he stated that his coin collection be split equally across his family. There was like 8-9 of us and 3 potato sacks full of coins. So we all gathered round a table and each took 1 coin each until nothing was left. Among the coins was an iron cross, which was quite odd as the only person on that side of the family that went to war was his dad. and he served with the Anzacs in World War I. This thread has inspired me to make my will something special that will be talked about in generations to come. Is it legal to let your descendants fight? Not actual fighting. More like a tournament for your inheritance. Because the idea of my grandchildren having to play a basketball tournament to see who gets my car is something I greatly enjoy. Random question. Could I just pick a random name in the phone book and add them to my will? It would be funny to have part of my will portioned out with odd requests for random strangers. Not me, but whenever I visited my old grandma in Nicaragua, it would always seem my aunts and uncles would be weirdly nice to her, almost as if she was a famous person. People would be visiting her house to greet her and strike a conversation. One day, my mother walked into my grandma's room to have a conversation with her. I remember during the flight back, 3-4 after the conversation, I asked her what the conversation was about. She told me that grandma used to have children that almost never talked to her, and now that she's sickly they are trying to act nice to get stuff out of her will. My grandma wanted to talk to my mom to ask her what she wanted from the house. My mom was always the favorite growing up since she cherished grandma, and grandma wanted to pay her back for being a good daughter. My mom replied with, "I don't want anything for you. I just want your love," and they both smiled at each other. Also, she wanted us to take a washing machine back home to sell it for cash, but we declined. For your information, she's still alive. Grandma ain't giving up yet. I'm not a lawyer, but my grandfather saved his kidney stone so that he could leave it to my cousin. They never really got along. Worked with a client who wanted language that her cats would be euthanized and buried with her. We had to explain why legally we couldn't do that. The moral part just went over her head. One of the few clients who ever got under my skin. Not a lawyer, but had a very interesting experience when my grandma passed. My family has pretty much moved on from where my grandma lived, except myself and my children. Every week I went to her house for dinner. When I had my youngest, who is 1 now, she cooked me a meal every day to feed my family so I wasn't drowning. None of her other grandchildren or children spent any time with her. When she passed there was a lot that everyone wanted, but she left everything to me. Even a stash of gold coins that she had buried in her backyard. She didn't have much, but the little things I have from her mean everything to me. It was a huge ordeal and pretty much everyone hates me, but maybe they should have spent time with her.